folks. Welcome to another episode of Broken Brains with Bruce Parkman, sponsored by the Mac Parkman Foundation, where we find the most interesting folks to talk to and discuss the issues that we're having today with veterans and soldiers and our kids and athletes that are suffering the effects of damaged brains from contact sports, from their military activities, from combat, and then all the problems and troubles that we're having with incarceration and treatment issues and everything, to have people understand the scale of the problem that we still have to deal with as a society. And so today we have another unbelievable guest, Mark Greene, U.S. Navy SEAL. I'm going to read you some quick excerpts from the bio. This is a long one, man, but an author. This is great, man. I love to meet fellow authors. We don't get to meet enough of them on the show. And here we go. But Mark SEAL retired for after 20 years as a Navy SEAL on Team 5, Team 8, Special Boat Team 20, worked at Special Operations Command Europe, which I know very, very well, and Naval Special Warfare Group 4. He's been in multiple combat theaters in the Pacific Command, Iraq, and Afghanistan, but he began his Naval Special Warfare career as a mine man. So we'll go back to that because we talk about subconcussive trauma. Well, what do you think a mine is? He said he served 2 years as an enlisted SEAL, and he became an officer. All right, well, we'll have conversations about that as well. And his career highlights were attending and graduating the Naval Special Warfare Sniper School, the NSW and SEAL Officer Commission course. As well, he earned his MBA and postgraduate school work focusing on financial management. He's earned numerous awards and has been in multiple combat engagements. And if that wasn't all, after retirement, he began a career at the University of Southern California's Director of Development for Veterans Programs. And he's a member of the President's staff as Manager of Military and Veteran Services. He's earned a Master's of Public Policy, and he's now returned to Virginia Beach, where he works as a corporate security analyst. Mark, thank you so much for coming on the show. It's
Absolutely.
amazing to meet you.
Now that you read all that stuff, I'm like, man, that's I've done a lot of stuff, and
we don't hold back here, man. Oh, you've done all you and we got to talk about the book, man. So yeah. So Mark, welcome on. It's we always start the show by ask you to talk a little bit about yourself, but talk about how your career and your life has intersected with brain injuries or brain trauma. I noticed that, you might have played, contact sports or whatever. Talk to us a little bit about yourself and, what made you become a Navy SEAL, right? I mean, a lot of us get there. There's so many different pathways to get into special operations.
Yeah, I started we get a lot of grief for writing books, and I was very hesitant to read my own or write a book on my own. And then I realized that I got interested in the SEAL teams from reading Marcinko's book. And then after Marcinko's book, and then I found all kinds of other books that former SEALs had written. And this was before the internet in the 90s. So that's really all you had. And, it took a lot to write the book. But then once I realized that I consumed and learned everything I could on books that I read. And so that's was the catalyst. But I was playing football in college, and I played quarterback at Miami of Ohio and Kent State. And I've been playing football since I think I was 9. And back in our day, when you got hurt, there's like rub some dirt on it and just get back out there. Or if you got a head injury, it's like, hey, you got your bell rung, but what day is it today? And then they send you back on the field to finish playing. So I think I got my first head injury. I think I was 10 or 11. It was a head-on collision with another kid, and everybody in the stands visibly or audibly like, oof. And we're both just sitting there, and I didn't know what day it was. And 2 minutes later, I was playing again. So that's how I first experienced brain injuries. But I was at Kent State and doing pretty well. I was progressing, but I took a shoulder injury that ended my career right away.
Oh,
And
really?
yeah, a buddy of mine, Jeff Turner, said, "Hey, bro, don't worry about it. We're gonna go be Navy SEALs now." And so there was a video that I watched called "Be Someone Special," and it was
Okay.
old school, and it turned on um, the inferno of going into the special operations. And, I decided that day that that's what I was going to do. So I transferred back to Miami after my career was over, and I just wasn't in it for athletics. And I flunked out of college, and I was working at Blockbuster Video, which I'm sure you know about, with all the gray
I
in your
still
beard.
remember
Yeah,
Blockbuster.
yeah.
I couldn't afford a VCR, but I remember Blockbuster Video.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and I met a gentleman who changed my life forever. He walks in and said, "Hey, man, do you know this movie about this one girl who turns into an alien and just starts eating people?" And I said, "Yes, sir, I think I do." And he's like, "Yeah, yeah, man, that movie's Speckies." And at that moment, my heart broke, and I said, "Sir, do you mean species?" And he's like, "Yeah." So at that point, I was like, I can't. Because
I gotta get out of here.
yeah, I was 24. So I was like, I got to do this thing now. If I don't do it now, I'm just going to be a regular guy. And I just didn't want that level of mediocrity, I guess, because my mom had always told me I was going to do something important and special. And at the time, I just wasn't on track to do that. And so after the species incident, I joined the Navy the next
Species.
day.
No kidding. So
Yeah,
did
yeah. I went
you?
down to MEPS and joined up the next day. And I shipped out about a month later
Okay.
and showed up to boot camp and didn't research the Navy uniforms or anything. And I show up 2 in the morning, get my uniform, and they give me these dungarees, what the Navy called them, just ugly bell-bottom blue jeans.
Yeah,
Yeah, and an uglier blue shirt. I'm like, ugh. Where's the Navy SEAL uniform?
yeah. You mean I'm not a SEAL already?
Yeah, yeah. He's like, man, nobody makes it through the SEALs. This is the Navy uniform, and I was like, ugh. All right,
Dude.
this is what we're doing. And I showed up at boot camp, and then back then we didn't have. It's not as sophisticated as it is now. You just showed up and said, "Hey, I want to be a SEAL," and you take the screening test. Week 4, and you pass the test, you get orders, and 6 months later, after A school, you're at Buds, and that's what I did. So I failed it the first time because as big and strong as I was, I couldn't do pull-ups. So,
Buds is no joke, dude, man. I mean,
well, no,
honestly, yeah, we all
yeah,
know that, but yeah, it's
yeah. So, I mean, it was the boot camp Bud SEAL physical fitness test, and I screwed up the pull-ups, so I had to work
on
super
on
hard.
the test.
Yeah, yeah. I didn't even show up yet. I was at boot camp.
Whoops.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So,
The
but I
people don't
needed.
know how hard pull-ups are when you're a big strapping muscular guy. That's a lot of, arse that you got to get up there,
Yeah,
it
I
takes
thought
a
I was
lot of
like,
weight.
yeah, how hard can they be? And then I found out.
Dang, dude.
But I ended up passing the test and went to Mineman A school, and you had to pass the test one more time. But I'd broken through that mental barrier of, hey, I can, I broke through a barrier. So like, okay, the next time I do it, I know how to prepare, and it was no big deal. Passed it again, and then I showed up at Buds in January of 1997.
What's a mind man? I haven't heard of that. MOS, is that like, I don't know, what is that, underwater demolitions or?
No, so it's the Navy. It's you're on a minesweeper ship, so you go out into the Gulf at the time, and you sweep the Gulf for mines. And the ship's made out of wood because metal's magnetic, and the mine will hook right up to the ship and
Oh,
blow up the ship.
so you're
So
bait.
yeah, yeah. So I was in A school, and I did a tour of the ship, and I was so tall I just bumped my head on everything. And
Dude,
the thing that turned me off completely, knowing that I'd never get on a ship again, was when they put me in the beds, and I was It's not made for a 6'3" guy. And
Dude.
my shoulders were spilling off the side. I was in the fetal position because that's the only way it could fit. I was like, yeah, I'm not
And
doing
they're
this.
stacked. What, you got 4 high or something like that, right? I mean, like,
Yeah, they were
you
four
can't sit
high.
up.
Yeah,
You can't sit up.
and the new guy gets the top rack, so I was going to be even more crunched. So I'm like, yeah, I'm not doing that.
You know, I've been on a couple of ships in my life with some training, and we do an AC/DC concert at one at the Special Operations Conference here. And man, when you crack your shin on, when you walk through the doors and stuff, you realize these boats don't move. I have no idea how you guys get through a tornado. You've still got hips and knees. I mean, like, there's no give on those boats at all.
Yeah, those poor bastards who do a career in the Navy, man. I'm like, man, you guys are cast iron, but they do it, and a lot of the guys love it. So I was not that guy, though. I was not
No,
yeah,
obviously weren't that guy. So it took you one tour of the ship to say, "Man, I'm done with this stuff,
yeah, I'm
man.
done. I'm good, man.
I'm gonna go. I'm gonna go figure out how to do pull-ups and get
Yeah.
out of here."
So
Good for you, man. Good for you.
yeah,
So 1997, you end up in Buds. I've run the beach in Coronado, by the way. I've got some good friends that I used to do some contracting with SEALs.
okay,
I've been running that. I run that beach, and it's because if you're not have an ID card, they just stop you. Right there
yeah,
at the
yeah,
base. So you end up in Buds, man. So I mean, what was
yeah.
that like?
It was great. I mean, it was incredibly challenging, and day to day, it was not as hard as I thought it would be, but cumulatively, it was much harder than I thought because 180 days of anything sucks. But at
Dude, yeah.
180 days at that level, and but once I showed up, my dad, when I was young, I was getting ready to go to my first practice, and he sits me down and said, "Okay, once you start something, there's no quitting. Like your teammates rely on you, and you could be the starter or you could be on the bench, but once you're committed to this thing, then you're committed and you're going to finish it." And I said, "Yeah, Pop, yeah, whatever." So he stops me, pulls me back, and looks at me in a certain way, like, "I don't think you understand what I just said." He's like, once you start something, that's it." And I was like, wow, this is okay. And from that day on, once I showed up at the SEAL compound, then that was all bets were off on quitting. That
Right.
wasn't even an option. So it was, now how do I figure this thing out? Because um, it's one of the toughest trainings in the world for a reason. And you're not in SEAL shape when you get there, and nobody is. So
Right.
it took me about a month of pre-training just to get in shape, and that was a struggle. And I thought I was not doing well, and I was bugging the instructor staff all the time. And finally, there's like, "Green, just shut up and color, and we just do what we tell you. You're asking too many
Right.
questions. It's not that serious." And but I was like, I took it very seriously. I respected it. And there's a gentleman named Senior Chief Mink, and he was a development group guy, one of the plank owners. And as I was struggling one day, internally I was struggling. The instructor staff thought I was doing well, and he pulls me over to the side, and he does one of these, looks over and said, "Okay, hey, you're doing fine, but I'm going to give you this sunscreen. It's called Bullfrog." And he's like, "Everybody I've given Bullfrog to has graduated." And he looks around again. He's like, "And I'm giving it to you." And it was like a trophy, right? And it was like in Indiana Jones when he got that golden head, and it was just glowing, and just like, "Ah." And that bottle of Bullfrog, that was the last thing I needed to that confidence booster. I was like, this guy is a plank owner at the highest level in the SEAL community, and he says I'm going to be fine. So once I figured that out, and um, figured out how to get through buds, which for me it was, my stomach would growl every 4 hours, and magically they fed you every 4 hours. So once my stomach started growling, I was like, I'm good, man. I'm getting ready to go eat.
It's funny
So
when you take hunger off the table, man, how far you can go.
yeah. So I was like, well, I can do this for another 20 minutes because they got to feed me. And then once I broke it up in
Dinner bell rings.
yeah. Once I broke it up into increments that I could manage, like guys look at it as a 6-month thing. And those guys overwhelm themselves and they eventually quit. And I just knew that physically I could do it. Mentally I could do it. And then I just had to keep my body straight and then not get overwhelmed by it. So for me to not get overwhelmed, I just took it in 4-hour increments.
And people don't understand too that once you graduate buds and all that craziness, you're just the FNG on the team. You still got all kinds of, you got, whatever, jump school, halo school, you got all this other training.
Yeah.
So, I mean, what was the cumulative total of training to finally, feel like you were that fully qualified,
I think the day I retired, I was like, okay, I'm a good SEAL. Right?
Good answer. Yeah. I never was really a good Green Beret until I became a sergeant major. So I got you, man.
Yeah, it took a while because, because BUDS is just a selection course.
Right.
And back then you're not learning anything really. It's just, you're learning the basics. It's basic underwater demolition and you're learning the basics. You can't do anything once you get on a team because you don't know anything. So we went to the SEAL qualification course, which was another 6 months. And then we get integrated into a platoon, and that's when the learning starts.
Fun stuff.
And it's fire hose on full blast, and you're under constant scrutiny, and you have to perform, and you don't have your trident at that point. So if you're not doing well, the chief can say, "Hey, man, he's not cutting it, then he's not going to be a good SEAL." So you get to go away after all that work. So you're always on edge, and the information's coming fast, and you have to perform. And so I got my trident, and they said, "Hey, guess what you get to do? You get to go to the SEAL Weapon Systems course," which was basically a demolition course. It was 2 weeks long, and a week long was just calculating blasts and executing stuff like that. So the worst position, I think, was the 3 position, because as waves propagate, they kind of come around and smack you at a certain point. And all the old guys knew that the 3 spot was the worst, so they're going to put the new guy in there. So for a week and probably 100 blasts, I was just getting my ass handed to me. And I think that's
100 blasts in 1 week.
Yeah, easy. Dude. In the 3 spot, in the worst spot. And you just had to suck it up. And we didn't know any better back then. We didn't know about brain injuries.
What year was this?
I think it was 98.
Okay. 98. Yeah. That's when I was still in the Army back then, man.
Yeah.
So we didn't know. I built the urban, the whole SFOUT, the CQB course for 10th Special Forces Group, and we didn't have no blast, shields, no nothing. I mean, it was just, let's get in there. Where's your bullet traps? Line them up, move them around, stack on the door, blow it again. So yeah, I mean, and that was just becoming a demo guy. And then once you get back to the team, you practice that stuff, quite a bit too.
Yeah, and then going through sniper school, you're shooting the 50 cals, and I think you're only supposed to shoot 20 rounds a day because the blast and the concussion causes
the PSI
micro tears in your heart and lungs. And they were like, "Yeah, this is what you're supposed to do, but we're SEAL, so we're gonna max it out." I think we were shooting
guidance.
100 rounds. Yeah. So
the guidance is 20 rounds, but we're SEALs, so we're tough. It's
yeah, we're gonna triple that.
So you shot 50s in sniper school.
Yeah, we learned all the weapon systems. So we did 308, and then we did 300 Win Mag. Oh, so wait, I'm sorry. We started off with M14s. And Army
that's what I
went
to sniper school with. Yeah, way a long time ago. Yep.
Our Army marksmanship unit came out and taught us how to shoot those iron sights. So you had to pass the iron sight course to graduate to earn optics. And M14 was fine, and then we went to the bolt gun, 308, and then we went to the 300 Win Mag, and then finally our last qualifier was on the 50 cal.
Dude, that's an amazing gun too, man.
Yeah, it reaches out, doesn't it?
Touch you from far away. But you're right, man. That PSI, I think for a 50 cal, it was at a counter blast measures conference about 2 months ago. And I think a 50 cal, the acceptable range for PSI on anything is 4 PSI. I think a 50 cal is between 18 and 21. And that's just one shot. So now you're talking about, hammering multiple shots. And then we'll talk about combat a little bit later when you rip off an entire belt of 100 of those darn things.
Yeah.
And every one of those is a subconcussive hit. So yeah, man, so that's crazy. So all right, so you went to the sniper school. Now, do you have does everybody do this in a SEAL platoon? Is this like part of the Q course, or individuals get assigned these tasks to go accomplish and come back to the platoon?
So normally you are a seasoned guy. Maybe after your second platoon, maybe your third, you put in for sniper school, and you might get it. So everyone's chomping at the bit to get sniper school. And Bruce, I got home from my first deployment, and I was just walking around the command, and some guy yells out, I was like, "Hey, what are you doing?" And I look around, it's senior chief, and I was like, "Hey, senior, I just got back from deployment, just kind of hanging out." And he's like, "Pack up your shit, you're going to sniper school." And I was like, "No, I'm not."
You've been voluntold.
Yeah, and he's like, "We need one more body, and you just happen to be walking by, so you're going." And I was like, not prepared, confidence wise. It was a confidence thing, because it's a 10-week stress course, and it sucks. But you're learning a brand new skill and art, really.
Oh,
and it was tough. It was one of the toughest. Other than Buzz, I think it was the hardest course that I've ever been to. Just because there's so little room for mistakes, because you have to score an 80% on all your tests over the course of 10 weeks, and then you go over to the stalking portion, to the sneaky guy portion, which I didn't pass the first time. And it's just the way my mind works. They gave a demonstration, a quick one. It's like, "Hey, here's how you build up a gun," but they didn't actually show us how to do it. Some guy was already prepped, and his gun looked beautiful, right? And we couldn't find him. It was like, "Oh, that's awesome!" And the next day, we got to practice for like an hour, and like, "All right, tomorrow morning we start graded." And I just never figured out in a way that I learn, which I appreciated more when I got to actually teach the sniper course years later. And I really just taught my students in the way that I happen to learn, which was answer every question, stay late, and just guide them through it and explain to them why they're doing what they're doing. And then finally they would fire me, which was the best day, because I would be in their ear and, "What do you see here? And what are you doing here?" And one day they'd say, "Mark, I got it." And the light bulb came on, and then at that point I was a fired instructor, and I was just kind of given small course corrections or something, but the teaching portion was done, and they took over and did a great job. But I loved the day that I got fired by my students.
The first thing I'll say is I used to hate stalking because nothing ever moves so slow in my life, dude. I am an impatient man, and crawling and moving at the speed of molasses, it wasn't for me. I mean, I was a Cat 2 sniper, man. It was SF had this school. I went to it, man. It was pretty cool. I wasn't a Sephartec sniper. And then, but your point is, and then of course we'll talk about your career in between. But now as a sniper instructor, we're seeing significant problems with range safety officers because their only job is to take those subconcussive hits all the time. I mean, if you're a student, you're there for, you said, like 2 to 10 weeks, or whatever that, I'm sorry, the time frame, but your exposure is kind of short, but it's significant. Now, if that's your job, big man, you're doing this thing 12 months a year.
Yeah, for 3 years.
3 years. For 3 years, you're sitting there eating subconcussive blows. And I'm trying to get the audience to understand, this is just one aspect of a military service job that has never, ever until now been understood or evaluated or considered an injury. That, and what and this is what we're diving into, stories like yours that are directly can be attributed to military service, where, we're not, it's the military hasn't even caught up to this concept yet. They're starting, they're doing I got to say, they're starting to really pay attention, but we've got decades. Well, we got 2 decades of combat deployments and training where we've trained harder than ever. And so, all right, so let's go right to 9/11, man. I mean,
Okay.
obviously you're in the SEALs. 9/11 happens, man. Where's Mark Greene? What's Mark Greene doing? And then what happens to Mark Greene right after that?
So we're on our second deployment in the Pacific, and we're on Okinawa, and we're up watching a movie, and all of a sudden one of the guys calls everybody in, and we see one of the towers on fire or smoking, and we all are kind of like, what movie is this?
Yeah,
Because
right.
I mean, you don't the Twin Towers, you never see them on fire, and all the information's coming in, and we're watching, and then all of a sudden we see the second plane crash into the tower. I was like, okay, we're at war. Then the phone starts ringing, and everybody needs to be accounted for. And so we're supporting the Navy, right? So we get on the USS Germantown and start heading south towards Jakarta, Indonesia, because outside of the Middle East, that's the highest concentration of Muslim population outside of the Middle East. And they were threatening to overrun the embassy. So we were preparing for a MEO, and the Navy consolidated, the Marine Corps, and everybody, all their aircraft and their ships, we just started steaming south. And, we're practicing and implementing Vietnam era tactics because we didn't know it.
That's what we know, dude.
Yeah, we were prepping for the last war.
Yep.
Right. So, so we're going down to Jakarta. And as we get down there, things kind of settle down because, you talk about a lot of stuff until the Navy shows up, until the U.S. military shows up. And it's like, yeah, I think I'll think twice about this whole.
Give me a few seconds there.
Yeah. So nothing ends up happening. But, and we thought we were going to go right from there to Afghanistan and just start shooting bad guys. But, we're required to, we have obligations in the theater, as you know. And in the meantime, actually downrange, they're using Vietnam era tactics in Afghanistan, and they don't work anymore. They don't work there. And so the development group luckily came back and said, all stop. What we're doing is not working in this theater. So they would come back and develop tactics on the fly, perfect them, and then come back from deployment on, and then show up to the regular SEAL team and said, okay, everything you're doing, we're not doing that anymore. And here are the new tactics. So everything changed. And luckily we're so small that we could implement those changes right away. So I came home from that deployment and put in for my OCS package to go to become an officer. So from 2003 to January of 2004, I was getting my commission. And I got my commission, showed up, reported to SEAL Team 8, and that's when I found out that all the tactics had changed. And I've kind of been out of the game for almost 2 years. So from deployment, return from deployment, teaching the sniper school, going to OCS, and then showing up at SEAL Team 8. It was about 18 months. So I was a brand new guy again because I didn't know the new tactics.
You got to catch up.
Yeah, so I had to catch up. And again, fire hose on full blast, and new weapon systems were getting introduced. And that's when I discovered what a Carl Gustav was. And you talk about blast and minimum, I think for that weapon system, I think it was minimum of two to three.
Well, they had no minimum until I don't know. I'm still trying to research that one, but it wasn't until not too far long ago, like 2012, 2013, they said, okay, 4.
Yeah.
And I mean, so how many, of course, that doesn't apply to Navy SEALs, right?
No, no. They're like 4 my
no
ass.
Minimum.
We have 100 rounds and we're going to shoot 100 rounds.
We're not turning these in.
Yeah. So then it's another getting your bell rung again over and over. And then you're learning the system, but then you don't get to go away. You're RSOing for the guys who are up after you. So you're getting probably 60 to 80 rounds a day for the 3 or 4 days that we're training on that thing.
And for those of you that don't know what a Carl Gustav is, it's an anti-tank. It's a big missile that's launched. What millimeter is that, Mark?
I have no idea.
But
I'm still
this
a
thing takes.
caveman, Bruce.
Yeah, I mean, when you just if it take down a tank, I know that the boys use them a lot to take down houses because there just comes a point where if you're taking fire, you might as well just knock the dang house down.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, this thing puts out a massive blast, and it just happens to be right next to your ear, which
Right.
is unprotected. Even if you have ear protection, that is a quick pathway right to the brain.
Right.
And so the 80, that's 84 millimeter. Right, so the mortars that we fire traditionally in infantry are 81s. Spec ops guys like Mark and I carried 60 millimeters back in the day. I don't know what they do now. I'm the caveman here, but an 81 millimeter rocket or 84 right next to your ear. And I mean, they just started realizing. I don't even know what caused them to say, "Hey, it's got a limit." So you're over there not only shooting the damn things, but now you're teaching them, and then you're the RSO for the guys coming behind.
Yeah.
Wow. How many of those things do you think you fired in your life?
I think I fired at least 30, but I RSO'd for at least 200.
And there's really not too much of a change.
I was like, what's the difference?
Whether you're shooting it or you're sitting right on the guy's shoulder, eating it anyways, right?
Yeah. So the only safety on it was, they had some breacher did the minimum safe distance on it, but the biggest concern was, hey, we're double ear pro and you're fine.
Dude, and what's the shot? I mean, I've never fired one, so
it's brutal.
I mean, you could feel that thing, right?
Oh yeah,
I mean, it's got to be. I mean, you can feel a mortar when it leaves the tube, but I can only imagine having that thing going right next to you. It's got to, and it's it's not only the blast pressure when it goes off, but when it goes out the tube, that all that pressure is coming back at you from the motor, or whatever's on the ass end of that thing.
Yeah, wow. It's a monster. I mean, it's a great round for 4 rounds, and then you're just getting your ass kicked for.
How do I focus after that, man? It'd be like drinking a 6-pack or something, trying to shoot the first one. Man.
Well, and that's the thing. You get done on the range, and what do you do afterwards? You go out and have a couple beers or whatever, and that can't be in any of the manuals for recovery.
Dude. So let me dial into something else, because I try to tell folks all the time is like, look, whether it's sports or military training, we can make it safer. We can limit exposure. We can come up, like I saw some of the guys, some of the spec ops guys that are now coming up with blast packages where they can wrap the blast in plastic or metal that puts the pressure outward while they're cracking the door. So, I mean, we're looking at different ways to mitigate exposure. Yeah. But in combat, it's like a football game, man. You got to leave it on the field. So talk to us about I mean, what we've done in training, what you've done in training, right? I mean, that's one, obviously a bunch of significant trauma that your brain has been exposed to. Now, what about combat when you just have no control over how many rounds you're going to fire? Well, I mean, an engagement. I mean, do you even wear ear protection in these things? I mean, if you're going full time, I mean, or can you even talk to each other? Is it all radio or?
Yeah, it's all radio.
This is a whole war I missed, man.
Yeah, so we have integrated sound canceling headphones that act as our comms headphones. So your ears are protected, but your head's not protected. The rest of your body's not protected, really. So and even in training, you throw those flashbangs, and it's an overpressure situation because the room's usually closed off and small. So those things are you're getting 60 of those a day because you're doing day and night runs. But when you're on target, the breacher shows up and you crash. They blow up the door, and if your target's pretty heavy with bad guys, you're crashing stuff all over the place. And then if that target leads to something else, then you're loading back up, and then you're going back and doing it again, over and over again for a cycle. So we would go out probably every other night, and just doing the same thing. And if you got lucky as far as concussions go. You weren't throwing. You were going to permissive targets where you breach the door, go in the room. They're like, "Hey, yeah, we're good."
Right.
But you're still getting that blast, and it's just continuous.
Dude. So, and how many deployments did you have, Mark?
Five or six. I
Five,
can't.
5 or 6.
Yeah, I'm trying to think. I think it's six, but my sixth one, I was on the staff, and so I didn't go out. So I don't count that really as a going out and kicking indoors combat deployment. It was supporting the special operations guys, the Green Berets, primarily in Afghanistan.
And that's a whole nother aspect of this is that, when I talk to people, I say, look, I mean, in Vietnam, you did one tour. If you're a little nuts, you could volunteer for the second. And I know some psychopaths. I mean, they were bona fide crazy guys that
Yeah.
trained me that had 3 tours, right?
Mm-hmm.
But to hear you say 5 tours, that's like the average, right? And
Right.
some are higher, some are lower. And how long was each tour, Mark?
So ours were luckily just 6 months. I mean, you guys go over for a year. Conventional guys go over for a year.
Right.
But yeah, I went Iraq, then came back and did special operations over in PACOM. There was a little skirmish going on in Philippines that was rarely talked about. Different aspect of combat over there. Then came back and then went to Afghanistan, and then it was Iraq and Afghanistan combined. So we were, we're in theater at least 4 or 5 times.
Wow. And then that's discontinued all the way through your retirement?
Yeah. So I went over to Sakure, and that's when I did the staff deployment.
Oh, that's a tough deployment over there with all that beer and schnitzel.
Yeah. Picked up a couple pounds, Great appreciation for German food. And,
oh, God, I love that place.
Yeah. But, seeing it from a staff perspective that's when you start to open your aperture to not just the tactical level. You're looking at what the general sees and what the State Department sees, what Department of Defense sees as the strategy for combat and winning or sustaining. And it's a completely different picture. And a lot of thought went into how we were going to utilize forces, internal and external, and, to meet our objective, to meet the mission. But we were still getting mortars on base all the time.
In Sakure.
When
you were forward deployed. Yeah, when you were forward deployed as part of the command. Okay. Mm-hmm. Oh, yeah. Yeah, those things, I had to go visit some of my employees every now and then. Yeah, that stuff was nonstop. That was like white noise, unfortunately, right?
Mortars hitting all over the base. And, my first alarm clock in Iraq was the IEDs that would go off 8 a.m. after prayers. That's your alarm clock. 8 o'clock, 8:05. So the first one that went off, I jumped out of my bed. And Bruce, if you would have asked me where that blast started, I would have said in my tent or right next to my head, or right outside.
They're that powerful.
Yeah. And you would go into the talk, and you would get the report, and it was sometimes 12 miles away, but it felt like next door.
Massive amounts of explosives.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Wow. Dude. So you get through, and so you get through your 5 tours,
mm-hmm.
Your command time, and then you decide to retire.
Yeah. So it was 20 years, and, I was 44, and like, I'm going to be more marketable at 44 than 54. And it was, it was time to go. And so I retire, and the worst thing was Friday, I was Mark Greene, Navy SEAL, cool guy still. And Saturday, I was just Mark. Nothing special about you anymore. You can't go back to the compound anymore. The guys are still running and gunning. And I considered myself tolerated but not welcome anymore. And it wasn't bad. It was just the guys are still in it. They're still, the props are still
I got no time
spinning.
for you, man.
And they like, hey, Mark, great to see you. We're heading down to do our land warfare in Arkansas or wherever we're doing it. and let's go have a beer next time we connect. And a lot of the times you don't get to see the guys anymore. And it's not that they don't like you anymore. It's just you're not a team guy anymore.
Oh no,
Yeah.
you are right there. I don't know if you went through depression. I
Oh,
was I couldn't get a job. I was so depressed when I got out of the Army. Same thing. Green Beret Company Sergeant Major, Green Beret Pirate Captain.
yep.
And next thing you know, I'm getting married. 2 girls coming in my life. I wanted to go back to combat, bro.
Yeah.
And I'm like, so it is. It's a tough transition. And then after that, is that when you started noticing that you were, having, struggles with, the mental health or lethargy, or how did those challenges start?
So
After
it
you got out?
started after in 2010, my deployment coming back from Afghanistan. And we were working pretty hard. And there was a helo that had gone down. They were doing turnover, and SEAL Team 4 and SEAL Team 5 were doing turnover. Helicopter crashed, and the CO said, "Hey, Mark, doing a great job. There's going to be a firefight because we got to go destroy that helicopter. So you and your boys get to go up, and there's going to be a firefight, and have a good time." And so we go up on the mountaintop, and no kidding, it was just mayhem up there. And I got on a plane, packed up my stuff after that op, and I was flying home the next day. And then I did a job of the operations officer, the S3. And that's when I realized, like, I couldn't organize my thoughts. I couldn't learn as fast and I just wasn't picking it up. I was like, I'm smarter than this. I know I can do this. But
So you're still in the military at this time.
Yeah.
Oh, so this started before you retired.
That was back in,
I didn't know that. Yeah, okay.
Yeah, I didn't know it either until I retired, got some help, and they started going through your background and like, when did all this start? And that's when I realized, like, I got home from my Afghanistan tour and I just couldn't learn anymore. And it was such a struggle. Things that I could rattle off right away or organize quickly, it was like I was running through a swamp. And I just couldn't
you
figure
hit
it
it
out.
and nobody noticed, huh?
Well, the commanding officer knew it. He's like, "Mark, what's going on? You're just
wow.
Why aren't you figuring this? It's a hard job, but it's not so hard. You have a master's degree. What are you doing?" And I was like, "Boss, I don't know." And it was just either you're not trying hard enough or you're just not good at this job. And this is almost 12 years ago. There was no science behind it. It was just, "Hey, you suck." And I was trying to say, I was like, "Yes, sir, but I just can't figure this out." And it was, so that's when it all started. And then when I retired, when everything got quiet, as you know, Bruce, when you don't have anything on your plate and life just gets quiet, and that's when things start to manifest, and you're not sleeping, and you're not able to connect with your family. Depression sets in because you're not doing the job again that you've trained 20 years for, and that was your life. I mean, it's all inclusive, and you're just not doing that anymore. And you don't have a job. You're unemployed for the first time in 20 years. You don't know what you're good at. And then you're just like, man, I am not doing well. But
were you married?
Yeah, I was married. Yeah, married, 4 kids.
Wow, you got all that going on.
Yeah.
Too,
so the opportunity to go out to University of Southern California just happened to land in my lap. I met this wonderful gentleman in New York City for a fundraising event.
And you guys fundraise better than anybody I know, man. I've been trying to get Green Berets to take lessons from you for a decade, dude, man. But yeah,
you need to have the right
talk about your
fancy
fundraiser on that big aircraft carrier, man. You guys got it going, man. My hats are off to you from the way you take care of your community, man. It's amazing.
Yeah,
it really is.
We've had a lot of support, which is good. But this gentleman, he asked what I was gonna do when I retired. I was like, "Sir, I have no idea." I was like, "I don't even know what I'm good
at." I'm laughing because I've been there, bro. Yeah. I mean, that's it. I'm laughing because I've been there.
Yeah, and I was applying for the FBI, and that was the easy button. And he flew me out to LA, and he just took care of me. He's like, "Hey, we're going to make sure you're taken care of." And one thing led to another, and he read my resume and said, "Hey, Mark, the company I own, I'd be doing you a disservice to stick you behind a desk. Now you have a job if you want one, but I'm going to go take a campus tour. I got to see a buddy of mine at USC. Do you want to come? I was like, hell yeah, I want to go to USC. So he knew that I would be a good fit there. And I go on campus and it's just awesome. It's graduation week. There's a different kind of mayhem and chaos. And I step out of the car and said, man, this would be a great place to work. And he never said anything and I never said anything. 2 weeks later, he said, everything we talked about 2 weeks ago, forget it. I got you 4 interviews at USC. And I was like, okay. I was like, well, what am I interviewing for? And he said, oh, don't worry about it. Just don't suck. And he hung up the phone.
Okay.
All right. So I get a USC colored tie, I get a suit, and I show up to my interviews. And I'm practicing. So I mean, I know I'm not going to move out to LA. And so I'm just practicing. And the gentleman says, hey, Mark, when you're done, just come back to the office and we'll talk real quick. And I was like, yeah, no problem. So I come back to his office and said, hey, what's it going to take to get you at USC? And it took me a second and I was like, holy crap, this is a job offer. So to be polite, I threw out a number that I thought was astronomical, right? And I was like, well, here's my asking price. He's like, oh yeah, no problem. Shit.
I could have gone more.
Yeah, I was like, well, I was expecting him to say, you little punk, get out of my office. And I'm like, oh, sir, I get it. Thanks for the offer, but I'm going to have to decline. But he just he's like, we want you out here. And so not being prepared, I was like, oh, well, my wife works in the medical field and, getting her job is going to be a pain in the butt. And of course I didn't research it. So he gets on the phone, calls up a guy and said, hey, I got a guy I want to hire. Do you have a position at the USC Medical Center? I was like, shit. Right.
You're in a hole now.
Yeah. And then I had one more out. Bruce had one more out. So I said, oh, I have 3 kids and school systems I don't even know where to live. The school systems suck. Gets on the phone again and said, hey, I got a guy I want to hire. Do you still have those 3 scholarships at the private school?
Those 3
I'm like, bro, come on. So it was like a mafia movie. Like, it was an offer I couldn't refuse. So he hangs up the phone and he's like, are we good? I'm like,
do you have anything else?
I was like, yeah, I think we're good. So,
wow.
Yeah. So, but my wife at the time was not having it. And so the gentleman who got all this started said, okay, how about this? How about have your wife come out? She can pick any house in LA, Malibu, Beverly Hills, whatever.
Dude.
Have her pick her house. You stay out here for 5 years. I'll pay off the loan. The house is yours. And I go back to my wife. I'm like, you are not going to believe what kind of stuff they just offered.
This is the best package I've ever heard. I've been employing people for 20 years.
Yeah. She's like, yeah, I'm good. So she stayed here. And I'm like, something good's going to happen out here. And I want you to come with me, but I can't force you to go, but I'm taking this opportunity. No, I made a family decision and I think she made an individual decision. So I took the job and it was going to only be temporary because my FBI package was, and as soon as that FBI package would have popped, I would have been like, hey, thanks for the offers. Great time out here. But when I got out there, it was just so welcoming. I know that I wouldn't reproduce that Navy SEAL locker room ever. It's such a unique, and like you wouldn't, your team rooms, there's been nothing like it, I'm sure, since you retired.
No, that's what I miss the most.
Yeah. So I knew I wasn't going to be able to recreate that locker room, but the people at USC were so welcoming. And they're like, hey, well, how long have you been, when did you graduate? It's like, no, ma'am, I just got here. I'm not a Trojan yet. It's like, oh, bullshit, you're a Trojan, you're here.
You got the tie.
And it was just, I had instant locker room again. I had a new mission now. And it was in an environment that I didn't expect, but they were my tribe. And I was like, this place is amazing. And I already had a master's degree. So I'm just like, how do I become a part of this thing forever? Because it was so, it was such an amazing experience that I said, I know I can't stay out here forever, but how do I remain part of this USC family forever? And unfortunately, some guys like, well, you have to graduate from college. I'm like, shh. And so I looked at the curriculum and said, I need a curriculum where it can be online so I can, because I'm traveling back and forth from LA to Virginia Beach to try to keep
Right.
my family together.
Check.
So I got a program that allowed me to do that. And the gentleman who got this all started, I said, hey, sir, I got into USC, but I'm not going to be able to afford it because I have to go from full-time to part-time. So I lose the educational benefit.
Right.
And he looked me straight in the eye and said, well, no son of mine's paying for college. And he worked it to where I didn't have to pay a dime for my master's degree.
Dude,
And
that is
that's it.
so. I'll tell you, we all got a mentor. Every now and then, if you look at your military career, there's phases career where you had somebody that took care of you. And that's
Yeah.
how we all get through life, man.
Yeah.
But somebody saw something in you to get that all put together.
Yeah.
That
And I found out. I was like, so what do you do anyway? He's like, oh, I'm a trustee at USC. So I was like, of course you are.
Of course you are. Dude, that's amazing. What a great story.
Yeah. And
So here you are, right? And I think I'd like to dive into that a little bit. And I definitely want to promote your book before we leave. So here you are in this amazing place, but you've gone through some really significant challenges. I mean, we just talked about all the trauma you had, not only as a child, but then as an adolescent, then as an adult, then with, combat deployments and all that.
Yeah.
What have you done to that, when you talked about getting out of the Army and out of the Navy and being, obviously depressed and trying to work through those struggles, what helped you get from that point? And I was there from a depressive state, not from a brain injury state, to where you are right now, because you sound healthy, you sound whole, you sound really, really well, and that I think that's amazing. So, what have you done to get to where you are, to the Mark Greene that we're talking to today?
Well, I did a ton of research, and somebody would say, hey, have you tried the Brain Treatment Center? I was like, no. I was like, well, here's what it is, and somebody's sponsoring it, so go ahead and go. And a portion of that would work, and then somebody said, hey, do you get enough sunlight? I was like, what are you talking about? Well, if you get enough sunlight at a certain amount of time, then it's going to give you some vitamin D, and then it's going to reset your circadian rhythm. And I tried that, and I was like, well, okay, well, that piece of it works. And have you been to therapy? I was like, yeah, I'm not really big on therapy. Well, have you tried EMDR? Have you tried trauma therapy? I was like, that sounds hokey. So I tried this modality called EMDR, and it takes trauma, just a blanket term of trauma, whatever you experienced in life or in combat, and it really just it takes it from the fight or flight center of your brain, and it just relocates it to it just being a memory. So when it stays in I think it's your amygdala. If it sits in that center of the brain, you're going to relive it all the time. As soon as you think about it, your heart rate's going to spike, and you're going to be back into that situation. But as EMDR works, it takes it from that fight or flight center, and then it just moves it to a different part of the brain, and it's just a memory. So then I tried that, and then my final thing was something called neurofeedback.
Okay.
And basically, and I'm not going to explain this well, so hopefully we can get somebody who's more articulate on it. But basically, it holds up a mirror and it says, hey, Mark, here's what your brain's supposed to look like. And then the treatment shows you what your brain's supposed to look like. And it says, in the mirror, look into the mirror, and through the modality, it realigns your alpha, your beta waves, and it just realigns everything. So EMDR takes it out of your fight or flight, and neurofeedback puts it in a file cabinet in the way it's supposed to look.
But you had to do this. You had to find this all out on your own. Like, there's nobody guiding you saying, hey, here's some treatment options, because have you done any psychedelics at all like that? Or
No.
Okay.
I didn't do the psychedelics because what I did and how it worked for me, I was like, okay, I'm that to my
If it's
normal self.
working, yeah, you don't
Yeah.
need, you don't need to, but it's but the point is, and that's the thing that we're trying to work on right now is that you should have guidance, and we should understand that when Mark gets out and Mark's played football and he's been a range safety officer, he's been a Navy SEAL, and he's been in combat deployments, blah 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 blah, that Mark is going to have some damage to his brain. And whether he realizes it and if we look for some of these psychological and behavioral disorders that are indicators that his brain's damaged, we got to fix the brain.
Right.
And somebody should be going to our veterans and saying, hey, here are some of the things, because no brain's alike. Nobody's brain, because nobody's going to have the same amount of impact that you've had in your life. So there's no way to quantify medicine, but there are a bunch of modalities out there that can help. And so for you to take that journey by yourself, for yourself means that you value yourself. And that's so amazing that you just didn't, you didn't give up on yourself. And unfortunately, a lot of our veterans, they get to a point where they don't have nice job packages, they got BCDs or other than honorable discharges, and they're out there struggling so hard. And there's no guidance for these guys, and just people aren't trained. So for you to go through that journey, is that in your book? Is part of that journey in your book?
Yes. Basically the book is really that journey, but there's a story in the book to where I had a moment to where I was in Home Depot, gotten a divorce and had to move into a new house. And I had my notebook, and I needed to get blinds for the windows. And I wrote all the measurements down in my little book, and I went in Home Depot. And Bruce, I think I went through putting the blinds in my cart and taking them back out at least 10 times. And I just couldn't solve that problem. And I had my daughters with me. And finally, my daughter, Evan, could tell it's like this is not that hard. And if she hadn't been there, I would still be in Home Depot trying to solve that problem, because I just
I'd have
grown roots and everything, but I just couldn't solve it. And she looked at my book, and she grabbed each item and put it in the cart, and she's like, "Okay, Dad, we're good." And then she finally asked, "It's like, Dad, are you okay?" And I'm like, "No, honey, I can't solve this problem." And she was 10 and solved it.
Oh, Lord.
10 years old, and I'm just like, okay. And that was the catalyst for, okay, you need to get some help. And that's when I really just opened up my mind and said, what's out there? And then one thing led to another. And in our conversation, you said, "Hey, have you tried psychedelics?" And it's like, I haven't. So, I'm going to go research what that looks like. I've heard about it, and I've heard that guys are going down and it's really helping. So, because I still don't sleep very well. And that's the
coming out. Yeah, we can talk on the side. I'm coming out for a psychedelic program next month, but it's not sponsored. It's pretty expensive, pissing me off, but God's been good to me. So, but there are these other modalities. There's supplementation out there that we found out. Neurofeedback and photobiomodulation are just one of 10 or 11 different therapies that are out there, but you got to pay for them. I want to get these things. I feel that they should be covered by insurance and TRICARE. We did this. Mark Greene committed no crime. Mark Greene joined the Navy to defend his country and support, and protect our society. And we sent Mark Greene to war. Okay. We, enabled you to become one of the best, right? Navy SEAL, man, badass, right? But there's a price as society that we refuse to acknowledge, nor that we refuse to pay. And we owe you. Okay. You have done amazing things on behalf of this country, as many, many hundreds of thousands of other veterans have.
Yeah.
And we have a huge hole of pain, carnage, suffering, and silence that needs to be addressed. And it has to be addressed through legislation. There's got to be a big check written for this so veterans can get the coverage they need. And for you to be sitting here with a book telling your story is amazing. And I absolutely want to thank you for sharing this journey with us, and opening up, because spec ops guys, man, we don't do that stuff.
Yeah.
But that's what it's guys like you that allow the human side of this to get out there, because we're all tough. We've all done hard things, but we're not good at being human sometimes. And I think you've taken those steps. Talk a little bit about your book. Where can we find it? Is there a website? Do you have other this is the time where I'll turn it over to you, man. This is it's your microphone, man. What you got?
All right, so the book is really about my journey through transition, and basically it goes from my childhood to college to my military career, but that's a very small part of it. The major part of the book is just my journey and struggle and triumphs of transitioning, and it's really it's no ego in it. It's just I really want the veteran. It's on a micro level. I want the veteran to read it and say, "Oh, this is familiar," and let me go do some research on my own. But on a macro level, I want because everyone goes through the entire family goes through transition. It's not just a service member, and I want a child to read this or a spouse to read it and say, "Hey, honey, you should read this because this is what you're going through, and it has some good nuggets in it." And that's really what the book's about. It's not a, "Hey, look what I've done and mimic me." It's like, "Hey, man, I struggled and I worked at one of the highest levels, and this transition got me. And had I not had the support that I needed, then I don't think I would have survived it." And I there was a point in time where it was for a couple of hours because I wasn't good at any one thing. Right, I moved to a new city, huge city, and I wasn't good at navigating the city. I went to a new job and a new career. I wasn't quite good at that. I was getting divorced, so I wasn't a good husband and I wasn't a good father. And then it crept up in my mind. I was like, well, what if what if the world is better off with me not being here?
Wow.
Right. And then I had this dear friend in LA who had a similar experience. And she just happened to call and say, "Hey, are you okay?" I'm like, "No, I'm struggling and I have guns in the house. So if you could do me a favor and just come over and get the guns out of the house for the small amount of time." And she said, "Hey, we all love you around here, right? And you're valuable, and you being around is better than you not being around." And that was just enough of a catalyst to say, "You know what? You're right. I have all these great things in life, and I'm just going through a rough patch. So in order for me to get back to healthy again, just come over, get the guns out of the house, and then we'll figure it out from there." And it was just person after person. It's like, "Hey, I understand what you're going through," because the friend of mine I'm talking about, she had had an attempt as well that she survived. So she knew exactly what was going on. And she said, "The one thing I wish somebody would have told me is that you're loved and you're valuable and we care about you and life is going to be better while you're still here." And she's like, "Your journey's not over yet, and I'm going to make sure that you make it." And I was like, "Damn it. All right." And
Wow.
so, yeah, and that's really what the book's about. It's stories like that it just highlights a struggle with no ego in it. And this is my journey, and I hope it helps. I hope it resonates with you in some way, that you do realize that please don't take a permanent solution to what is often a temporary problem.
That is a very powerful last statement right there, Mark. And a lot of times, guys like us, we don't give ourselves a break. And I've realized this. I'm almost 62, and I finally learned to like myself
Hmm.
and give myself a break. And I think, and I hope that you have. It sounds like you have.
Yeah.
Because we all need to pat ourselves on the back. We all have done. You have done amazing things, and you do have value. And that book just is additive value to what you're providing. Our community, our society. And I thank you so much from the bottom of my heart for your sacrifice, for being transparent and open with us today, for helping our listeners, and the people that they know that are struggling from mental illness as a result of the military service, and that there are paths ahead that lead to wholesomeness and health and joy, and you're living that now. So my hat's off to you, bro. I can't wait to meet you in person someday. I get out to California very rarely. It's a long trip, but when I do, man, We're gonna have a beer. I've been teaching Navy SEALs how to drink and fight for a long time.
Well, I'm up in Virginia Beach, so I'm up in Virginia now. Yeah, I'm not out in
man.
California anymore. Yeah. So,
Dude. East Coast, man.
yeah.
I'm in Florida.
Yeah. Oh, great. So, if they want to pick up the book, it's at themarkgreene.com. That's the website. It's also available on Amazon. And if you get it on Amazon, please leave a review, because interacting with it on Amazon pushes it up in the algorithm, and hopefully it gets to the right people. So
that's amazing.
Yeah, if you're struggling,
make sure.
If you're struggling, just give it and the Kindle version's $1, because it's not about finances. I have a good job and have good retirement, so it's not about finances. It's about getting the word out. And if you have $1 to spare, just go on Kindle and get the book, and hopefully it'll change. It'll be the catalyst that you need to take the first step on your marathon, because first step's the hardest.
Good. That's amazing. Now we'll definitely, when we publish the broadcast, we'll be putting the website so people can find it, and we'll keep that going, man.
Okay.
Thank you so much for your time today, man.
Absolutely, Bruce. Amazing. Thank you, man.
Great story. All right. Take care, boss.
All right. You take care.
All right.